It's 7 in the morning on a Tuesday. No alarm went off because you don't need one anymore, and the quiet in the house feels strange before it feels good. For years you were told there are four kinds of retirees. The broke one, getting by on roughly $1,200 a fortnight from the age pension. The comfortable one, sitting on a super balance around $630,000. The wealthy one, who never checks a balance at all. And the die with zero one, who spends the last dollar the week before the funeral. Each of those four types makes for a tidy video. Real life is messier. Your Tuesday might start with checking a council rates notice instead of a boarding pass. And that alone tells you more about your actual retirement than any four-way split ever could. Here's the problem. Most of the people watching this don't fit any of those four boxes, and if you've felt that gap, you're not imagining it. Try to run a comfortable plan when your real life is a patchwork of a part super balance, a paid-off house, and maybe a small rental, and you can leave real money on the table. Some retirees miss out on real age pension entitlements every year, simply because they assumed their super balance ruled them out entirely. Others run their cash down faster than they realize because they copied a plan built for someone with twice their assets. Today, we're not just walking through what Tuesday looks like for those four familiar types. We're naming the fifth type, the one that gets skipped over because it's harder to sum up in a headline, and showing you exactly where you sit and what that means for your own Tuesday. If you're between 55 and 65, and the standard retirement numbers never quite matched your bank account, stick around and subscribe to Aussie Retirement with Bob. We build around real numbers, not textbook categories. The fifth type doesn't show up in glossy brochures, but it describes most people watching this. According to the tax office, the typical Australian aged around 60 has a super balance closer to $200,000, not the $600,000 people picture when someone says comfortable retirement. Add a home with real equity, maybe a small rental or a parcel of shares, and you get someone who looks too well off on paper for a full age pension, but doesn't have anywhere near the $54,840 a year ASFA says a single person needs for a comfortable lifestyle. Most retirement advice assumes you're one of two things: fully self-funded, living off your own investments, or fully pension-backed, with Centrelink doing the heavy lifting. The fifth type is neither. You're a hybrid, and hybrids carry a risk the other two groups don't face in the same way. It's called sequencing risk, and it means a market drop in your first few years of retirement does far more damage than the same drop 10 years in, because you're pulling money out at the same time the balance is falling. Picture two retirees who both start with $400,000. One retires into a rising market, and the balance keeps growing even while they draw an income. The other retires straight into a 20% drop, keeps taking the same income regardless, and ends up with a permanently smaller pot for the next 20 years, even after the market fully recovers. Same starting balance, same drawdown, wildly different outcome, purely because of when the drop landed. Ask yourself honestly, if your super dropped 20% the same month, your car needed a new transmission, where would that money actually come from? You aren't failing at retirement because your super sits at $200,000 instead of $600,000. I've watched people psych themselves out over that number when the real levers were sitting right in front of them the whole time. You're running a different system with different rules, and most of what gets published online was never written for you. This is where the levers get uncomfortable. Say you're a single homeowner and your combined super and savings sit right at $333,000, the current full pension threshold. Push that up to $370,000, just $37,000 more, and your pension trims by roughly $111 a fortnight under the assets test taper. Every extra dollar you save quietly pulls a few cents of pension away in the background. which is exactly why so many hybrid retirees feel like they're being punished for doing the responsible thing. So what happens when that hybrid retiree realizes their Tuesday morning coffee is being paid for by a pot that shrinks a little every time they try to grow it? There's a real difference between being broke and choosing what I'd call frugal contentment. And mixing the two up does real damage to people who don't deserve it. Research into retiree well-being keeps landing on something counterintuitive. Retirees living on the full-age pension often report similar or higher day-to-day happiness than retirees sitting on portfolios worth well over $1 million, mainly because they've stripped out what you could call financial noise, the background hum of comparing your numbers to someone else's. If you're still driving a car that's 20 years old, or you check 3 supermarket catalogs before buying anything, even though you've got $200,000 sitting in the bank, that's not poverty. That's a habit built in a different economic era, and it's kept plenty of people out of trouble. Nobody watching this needs to feel judged for being careful with money. This isn't about being stingy, and it isn't about proving anything to the neighbors. Plenty of retirees quietly do the sums each quarter, checking the electricity bill and the council rates, notice against what's coming in, and feel completely fine because the numbers actually add up for the life they're living, not the life they think they should be living. I used to think the whole goal of retirement planning was to maximize the spend, to squeeze every dollar of value out of every year. I was wrong. I've met retirees on the full pension who are more genuinely retired than executives twice as wealthy because they've mastered what you could call the free Tuesday. A walk with a neighbor, an hour at the community garden, time that doesn't cost anything and doesn't need justifying. None of it costs much, and none of it needed a spreadsheet to justify. If any of this sounds familiar, try shifting the question you ask yourself. Instead of asking, can I afford this? Ask, does this actually add anything to my Tuesday? Half the spending most people feel guilty about skipping was never going to make their week better anyway. But there's a real danger sitting underneath all that frugal comfort, and no amount of coupon clipping fixes it on its own. It's what some call the aged care cliff, and it catches careful people off guard precisely because they've spent decades being careful about the wrong things, while the one cost that actually threatens their savings sits almost entirely outside their control. There's a popular philosophy floating around finance content at the moment, built on one idea: spend it down to zero. Don't die with a fortune sitting in an account you never got the chance to enjoy. It's a fair correction to habitual oversaving, but applied without thought in Australia, it gets reckless fast, because our aged care and pension systems quietly punish people who cut things too close. It's not a moral failing to spend confidently, it's just a system that needs a buffer built in before the confidence starts. Before you spend towards zero, you need a 3-step safety buffer. First, a longevity floor, a cash reserve built for living to 95, not 85, because plenty of people in your position will see their 90s. Second, a RAD reserve, meaning money set aside for a refundable accommodation deposit, the lump sum residential aged care now commonly asks for, which runs $400,000 or more in most capital cities, and sometimes well past $600,000 on top of daily fees, not instead of them. The money isn't gone forever. Most of it comes back when the room is vacated, but you still need it sitting there, ready, the same way you'd need a bond ready before signing a lease. Third, what you could call a memory dividend cap, spending deliberately on experiences you can genuinely only do now, not everything, just the things your future self physically can't manage at 85. Nobody puts this trade-off in the brochure. Retiring as a couple, you're generally planning for a horizon of at least 20 years. Spend an extra $20,000 a year chasing the die with zero lifestyle in your first few years, and you can strip close to $85,000 out of your super's long-term compounding power over a decade. Money that was quietly doing the heavy lifting in the background the whole time. So before you book the trip of a lifetime, ask which bucket that spending is coming from, the buffer or the money your 90-year-old self was quietly counting on. I watched a friend sell the family home to live large at 70. By 82, he was renting a granny flat in Western Sydney because nobody had walked him through what the upper deeming rate would do to the cash he had left. He didn't do anything reckless in one big moment. It was 100 smaller choices, each one reasonable on its own. That's the version of die with zero. Nobody warns you about. Not the reckless one, the quiet one that sneaks up through ordinary decisions. If die with zero is too risky and comfortable feels out of reach, how do you actually stress test the Tuesday you're building instead of guessing at it? Picture this. The share market drops 15% in a matter of weeks, and in that same stretch, your roof starts leaking and the repair quote comes in at $15,000. Two unrelated problems landing at once, which happens more often in real life than any spreadsheet admits. Add a Medicare gap payment landing the same fortnight, and it stops feeling like a hypothetical and starts feeling like a normal week. The unprepared version of the comfortable retiree, sitting 100% in growth assets because someone once told them super is a long game, panics, and sells at the bottom to cover the repair. They lock in the loss permanently, right when the market needed time, not withdrawals, to recover, and that single decision can follow their balance for the rest of retirement. The prepared version, the fifth type who actually planned for this, runs what's called a bucket strategy. 2 years of everyday living expenses sit in a high-interest cash account, earning somewhere around 4.5%, completely separate from the growth investments. The roof gets paid from that bucket, in full, without touching a single unit of the falling portfolio, which then gets years to recover on its own timeline instead of yours. That 2-year figure isn't arbitrary. It roughly matches how long a typical share market downturn takes to recover, so the growth assets get breathing room instead of being sold in a panic. There's a detail almost nobody notices. If your cash savings are earning more interest than the government's deeming rate assumes you're earning, currently capped around 3.25% on the upper tier, you are quietly beating the system's own assumptions about your income. That gap works in your favor every single fortnight, without you having to do anything extra. Ask yourself honestly, if that letter arrived this month, would you know which account the $15,000 comes out of without touching a single share? Most people assume the biggest risk in retirement is the market itself. It isn't. The bigger risk is what you could call the identity trap, spending years trying to live someone else's version of Tuesday instead of stress testing your own, quietly, on your own terms. So where do you actually start? 3 practical moves in order. Step 1. Know your number against the real threshold, not a guess. A single homeowner can hold assessable assets up to $333,000 and still receive the full age pension, with the family home excluded entirely from that test. If you're sitting just over that line, spending on an exempt asset like a home renovation can lower your assessable assets and lift your pension at the same time, instead of leaving that money sitting in an account working against you. It's the same logic as timing a car rego renewal or a strata levy payment. Small administrative moves that quietly change the numbers in your favor if you actually look at the dates. And it's worth checking every year, not just once. Step 2. Rethink your super drawdown. From age 60, withdrawals from a taxed super fund come out completely tax-free. Most people default to taking the bare minimum drawdown percentage because it feels safe, but that number was never built around your actual life. Work out what I'd call your Tuesday cost, the real weekly figure your lifestyle actually needs, and draw down to match that, not to match a government minimum that was set as a floor, not a target. For some people, that Tuesday cost turns out to be lower than the government minimum, which means there's room to relax. For others, it's higher, and that's useful information too, because guessing either way leaves money either stranded or spent too fast. Step 3. If you're still earning an income, use the concessional contributions cap while you still have it to use. It sits at $32,500 a year now, up from $30,000. And if your total super balance is under $500,000, you can carry forward unused cap space from previous years too. That's a direct lever for closing the gap toward the ASFA comfortable benchmark, and it works quietly in the background through your regular pay instead of requiring some dramatic lifestyle change. Even an extra few $100s a fortnight, redirected this way, instead of sitting in an everyday account, adds up meaningfully by the time you actually need it. It's one of the few genuinely free upgrades left in the system. You've now got the actual steps. But there's one thing that stops most people from ever using them, and it has nothing to do with money. That barrier, more often than not, is comparison. Retirement was never a competition between broke and wealthy. For most of you watching, it's about the fifth type, the hybrid retiree, who treats the age pension as a safety net underneath them and their super as the engine that actually funds the life on top of it. That's not a consolation prize. It's simply the version of retirement that fits how most people in Australia actually live. Whether your Tuesday involves a $5 flat white at the local cafe or a pot of tea made at home on the porch, the coffee itself was never the point. If the numbers underneath it are sound, the peace of mind is identical either way. Nobody is grading your Tuesday against anyone else's. The only comparison that actually matters is between your plan last year and your plan this year, and whether it's gotten a little more honest. If this helped you see where you actually sit on that spectrum, rather than which box you were told you belong in, hit subscribe. We're here to make sure your Tuesday stays yours, built around your numbers, not someone else's headline.